The room was thick with anticipation, the kind that lingered beneath the surface, invisible yet undeniable. The event had started as expected. Another press conference, another carefully curated moment in the never-ending spectacle of public life. Melania Trump stood at the podium, poised, polished, delivering her prepared remarks with the same quiet elegance that had come to define her. The initiative was simple, clear. A renewed effort under her Be Best campaign focused on children's welfare and online safety. It should have been routine, but it wasn't, because the people in the room weren't here for policy. The tension was subtle at first, barely noticeable, like an undercurrent beneath still waters. A whisper here, a knowing glance there, and then, the shift. A journalist leaned forward, a man well known for his sharp tongue, for his ability to twist words into daggers. He adjusted his tie, smirking slightly before speaking. "Mrs. Trump," his voice carried, laced with something just beneath the surface, mockery wrapped in feigned curiosity. Many people wonder, how does it feel to be more of an accessory than a first lady? The impact was immediate. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the crowd, a few nervous chuckles. Others stiffened, sensing the weight of what had just been said. It was not a question, it was an insult, a carefully aimed shot designed to provoke, to humiliate. Melania did not react, not at first. She stood still, her expression unreadable, her hands resting gently in front of her. There was no flicker of anger, no telltale sign of offense. Just silence. The kind that stretches longer than it should. The kind that makes people shift in their seats, that makes them wonder if they had made a mistake. But the journalist wasn't done. He leaned in, emboldened by what he mistook as weakness. "I mean, let's be honest," he continued, his smirk widening. "People don't exactly see you as, well, an intellectual force. Do you think your husband's presidency defined you more than your own actions ever could?" The room seemed to shrink. Even those who had chuckled before weren't laughing now. Some looked down at their notes, unwilling to meet the gaze of the woman standing before them. Others simply waited, watching, unsure of what would come next. And then, slowly, deliberately, Melania reached for the microphone. The energy shifted. Everyone was about to witness something they never expected. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with an electricity no one could quite name. The journalist sat back, confident, convinced that silence was surrender. He mistook her stillness for hesitation, her composure for weakness. He had seen this play out before. Politicians scrambling to deflect, to soften the blow, to turn the tide with rehearsed charm. But this was different. Melania Trump did not fidget. She did not rush to respond. She did not meet the attack with theatrics or protest. She simply let the moment stretch, let it breathe, let the weight of the question settle in the space between them. The journalist chuckled under his breath, filling the silence with his own arrogance. "Nothing to say?" His voice was light, feigning innocence, but the smirk betrayed him. "I mean, it's understandable. A lot of people wonder what exactly it is you do. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." A flicker of something passed through the crowd. It wasn't amusement anymore. It was discomfort, a shift. Some people straightened in their seats, others looked away. Melania let the silence linger just a moment longer before she exhaled, slow and measured. And then, she spoke. "You believe that because I do not fight for attention, I do not fight at all." The journalist's smirk faltered, just slightly. She continued, her voice steady, her accent deliberate. "You assume that because I do not argue, I do not think. That because I do not perform for cameras, I have nothing to say. But let me ask you, do you think power is measured by how loudly a person speaks?" The murmurs in the room grew. The journalist shifted in his chair. He hadn't expected her to take control of the moment so effortlessly. Melania tilted her head slightly, considering him, but there was no anger in her gaze, only something far more unsettling. Certainty. "For years, people like you have told me who I am," she said, each word cutting with precision. You have written my story for me, without ever asking if it was true. You assume that if I am not on television every day, I am irrelevant. That if I do not raise my voice, I am silent. You believe that power is in the hands of those who demand to be seen, but I have never needed to be loud to be heard. The room had gone completely still. The amusement was gone. The game had changed. The journalist opened his mouth, searching for a way to regain control, but the moment had already slipped from his grasp. Melania inhaled slowly. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less devastating. I wonder, she said, if that is why people like you are afraid of me. The silence was thick now, stretching between them like an invisible force. The journalist, once so sure of himself, shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering as the weight of her words settled over him. The room, once a space of easy laughter and thinly veiled mockery, had transformed. It was no longer an audience, but a courtroom, no longer a stage, but a reckoning. Melania Trump took a breath, steady, measured, her hands resting lightly before her. There was no anger in her posture, no hint of the frustration she had every right to feel. Instead, there was something far more powerful, an unwavering calm, a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any outburst ever could. I have spent my life listening, she said finally, her voice smooth, unwavering. Listening to what people say about me. Listening to the way they rewrite my story before I even have the chance to tell it. They call me quiet, but they do not understand what silence truly is. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not ignorance. Silence is patience. She let the words settle, let them sink into the spaces where laughter had once echoed. The journalist watched her, suddenly unsure of how to respond, how to twist the moment back in his favor. He had expected deflection. He had expected an attempt at charm, maybe a rehearsed answer. He had not expected control. I was taught, she continued, that words are only as powerful as the truth behind them. And the truth is this: you do not know me. You know the version of me that makes for an easy story, a version that fits neatly into your script, where I am nothing more than a name, a title, an image. But tell me, if I had never married my husband, would you care enough to ask who I really am? The journalist blinked. The question was a mirror, reflecting his own assumptions back at him. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Melania tilted her head slightly, her gaze locked onto his. I think we both know the answer. The audience, once so eager to laugh along, now sat in complete silence. Some glanced at one another, as if realizing for the first time that they had been part of something they never questioned. The journalist swallowed, gripping his pen a little tighter, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. He wasn't used to losing control, but control was no longer his to hold. Melania let the silence stretch, let the weight of her words settle like an invisible force pressing against the walls of the room. The journalist, once so sure of himself, now sat still, his confidence visibly cracking. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't nodding along, they were watching, listening, waiting. And then she spoke again. You see, while you were busy crafting your version of me, I was doing something very different. You never asked, you never wondered, you never considered that perhaps the woman you mock has done more than you ever imagined. But allow me to ask you something. If I had not been given this last name, would you still judge me before you knew my story? The words hung in the air like a verdict. The room was so silent that even the faintest breath could be heard. The journalist swallowed, visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in his seat as if trying to find an escape that did not exist. Melania exhaled softly, her voice unwavering. For years, I have worked behind the scenes, helping people who will never know my name. I have funded shelters for women escaping violence, built programs that provide opportunities for immigrant families, and supported initiatives that have changed lives, not for recognition, not for headlines, but because I believe in action, over words. And while people like you were busy discussing me, I was busy doing something real. The tension in the room shifted. A few heads nodded. Some reporters exchanged glances, the weight of the revelation dawning upon them. You assume "I do nothing because I do not announce my every move," she continued. "You assume I am silent because I do not need the world to see me act. But tell me, does a good deed only matter if cameras are there to capture it?" A slow clap echoed from the back of the room, then another and another, until the applause swelled, rolling through the crowd like a wave. The journalist looked down at his notes, suddenly small beneath the weight of the moment. Melania did not gloat. She did not smirk, did not revel in his discomfort. She simply placed the microphone back where it belonged and stood there, poised, unwavering, as the world around her changed. The applause surged through the room, building with a force no one had anticipated. It wasn't the polite, scripted kind reserved for politicians. It was real. It was raw. It was the sound of people waking up. The journalist shifted, gripping his pen a little tighter, his smirk long gone. He had walked into this room believing he controlled the narrative. But now, he was merely a spectator in a story that had slipped from his grasp. He cleared his throat, a weak attempt to regain footing. "Well, Mrs. Trump, I suppose that's one way to look at it." Melania turned to him, her expression unchanging, her voice calm. "No, that is the truth." The room was still. The air was thick with realization. Across the country, millions would soon watch this moment unfold. On news channels, on social media, in living rooms where people would lean forward, captivated by a woman they had thought they already knew. And just like that, everything changed. That night, the headlines didn't mock her. They praised her. Melania Trump shuts down reporter in stunning exchange. The moment that redefined a first lady. A conversation that no one saw coming. The clip spread like wildfire, dissected and debated by commentators who had once dismissed her. For years, they had called her quiet, but now they couldn't stop talking about her. The journalist, once so confident in his ability to shape the story, found himself at the center of one he had never intended to create. His question, the one designed to humiliate her, became a symbol of arrogance. And her answer? It became something much more. Melania never addressed the moment again. She didn't need to. Some victories don't require follow-ups. Some moments speak for themselves. She had said everything that needed to be said, and the world had finally listened.